Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into a really fascinating connection, one that maybe on the surface seems almost impossible.
Right.
We're talking about two incredibly influential movements. The Word of Faith movement, which is, a massive force in charismatic Christianity, and then the Law of Attraction, a cornerstone of modern New Age and self-help.
Yeah, they seem worlds apart initially.
Totally. I mean, think about it. One speaks of God, faith, divine covenants.
Mhm.
The other talks about the universe, vibrations, cosmic energy. They sound, well, diametrically opposed, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Different language, different frameworks.
And this is the kicker. If you really listen, there's this kind of startling echo. Let me give you an example. Kenneth Copeland, big name in Word of Faith. He states, and I quote, "Words are the most powerful thing in the universe. Faith-filled words will put the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus into operation." Now compare that to a core teaching from Rhonda Byrne's, a huge bestseller on the Law of Attraction, The Secret. She says, "Your thoughts become things. Whatever is going on in your mind, you are attracting to you."
Wow, yeah. When you put them back to back like that,
Right.
what jumps out immediately is, despite the different language, the underlying premise is, well, it's essentially identical.
How so?
Human consciousness, whether you call it faith-filled words or focused thoughts, is being presented as this direct creative agent, something that actually shapes material reality.
Okay, so that's our mission today. We're going to dig into how these two powerful forces aren't just, coincidental parallels,
Right.
but are truly like ideological cousins.
That's a good way to put it.
They both seem to spring from the same root system, this 19th century American metaphysical thing called New Thought.
Exactly. And for anyone maybe not familiar, New Thought is basically this movement that fundamentally asserts the power of the mind of thought over the material world. It believes your beliefs can directly influence your circumstances.
So it's mind over matter, essentially.
In a nutshell, yes. And while these two movements, Word of Faith and Law of Attraction, they definitely wrap themselves in different theological and philosophical veneers.
Yeah, Christian versus secular or pantheistic.
Precisely. They both rely on what you might call a shared metaphysical chassis.
A chassis, like the underlying frame of a car.
Kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Think of it as a common operating system for how the universe supposedly works.
Okay, I like that. So they both believe in a universe governed by these immutable, unchanging spiritual or mental laws
Mhm.
that individuals can understand and, well, manipulate, I guess.
That's the claim. Manipulate them to produce predictable, tangible results. Health, wealth, relationships, the whole package.
It's a bold claim, definitely.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this fascinating shared ancestry. Join us.
Okay.
So if we're looking for the blueprint, where do we start with Word of Faith, often called the prosperity gospel? It feels like a really fundamental restructuring of, the relationship between God, humanity, the material world,
It really is.
almost reframing Christian faith itself as a system of, spiritual laws.
Absolutely. And the ideological DNA for this, you can really trace it back to a figure named Essex William Kenyon. He was active late 19th, early 20th centuries.
Kenyon. Yeah.
And his central contribution was this concept he called positive confession. It's often summarized by the phrase, "What I confess, I possess."
What I confess, I possess, huh?
Yeah. And what's really compelling is the research by D.R. McConnell. He argues pretty strongly that Kenyon actually borrowed heavily from that New Thought movement we just mentioned.
Ah, so the connection is right there at the start.
It seems so. McConnell suggests Kenyon essentially Christianized New Thought concepts.
Mm-hmm.
He swapped out its idea of an impersonal universal mind
Right.
and replaced it with the God of the covenant. This made these sort of metaphysical ideas much more palatable, more accessible for a Christian audience.
Okay, so if New Thought was talking about tapping into some universal mind, Kenyon basically said, no, it's God, but he operates by these same kinds of principles. That's a huge reframe.
It is a really significant adaptation.
And then came Kenneth E. Hagin, often called the father of the movement, right? How did he take Kenyon's foundational ideas and, build the house, so to speak?
Hagin is absolutely pivotal. He took Kenyon's concepts and he systematized them, turned them into a truly replicable faith formula.
A formula, like a recipe.
Pretty much. It's famously known as say it, do it, receive it, and tell it.
Say it, do it, receive it, tell it.
That's the one. And this formula, it fundamentally transformed the understanding of faith for followers. It shifted from, say, relational trust in God.
Which is maybe the more traditional view.
Exactly. It shifted from that towards faith being seen as an impersonal, tangible force. even a controllable energy.
A controllable energy. Wow. That sounds less like a relationship and more like, well, like you said, a tool or a force you wield.
That's the implication. It's what some scholars call a mechanization of the divine.
What does that really mean for how a believer, engages with their faith?
Well, think of it less like prayer to a personal God who might respond based on relationship or wisdom,
Okay.
and more like pushing a button on a cosmic vending machine. If you apply the right faith technique, the right formula, you activate a divine law that compels a result.
Compels. So it has to work if you do it right.
That's the teaching. It's an almost scientific approach to spiritual matters. And Hagen's influence, it just exploded through contemporary exponents. Kenneth Copeland, for instance, he took these teachings and radicalized them even further.
How so?
He framed faith as the creative force of the universe. He even introduced the very controversial little gods doctrine.
Little God's doctrine. Wow. Okay.
The idea that believers are, in some sense, divine beings capable of creating reality with their words, just like God did.
Okay, that's quite a claim.
Indeed. Then you have figures like Creflo Dollar, who focused heavily on the financial aspects, teaching believers, quite literally, to create your world by the words that you speak, particularly concerning wealth.
Right, the prosperity part of the prosperity gospel.
Exactly. And then someone like Joyce Meyer offers perhaps a softer, more psychological entry point. She often frames these principles in language that sounds a lot like cognitive therapy. Think of her hugely popular book, Battlefield of the Mind.
So managing your thoughts to manage your life, but with a specific theological underpinning.
Precisely. It connects controlling your thoughts directly to spiritual power and outcomes.
So whether it's, radicalized theology or this more psychological framing, it seems the common thread is that this movement profoundly redefines the individual's role.
Absolutely.
It shifts it from being maybe a recipient of grace to an active, almost demanding participant in creating their own spiritual and material well-being.
The onus is really on the individual believer to operate the system correctly.
Okay, now let's pivot. Let's look at the law of attraction. At its core, it asserts that your thoughts bring corresponding experiences into your life. Consciousness itself is the primary causal agent. How does this compare?
Well, interestingly, the law of attraction's roots are also firmly planted in that same 19th century New Thought movement.
So, same starting point again.
Same starting point. We see these ideas codified by early 20th century authors. Think Wallace D. Wattles, who wrote The Science of Getting Rich way back in 1910.
Science of Getting Rich, okay.
And Napoleon Hill, with his absolute classic Think and Grow Rich from 1937. These ideas weren't exactly new when The Secret came along decades later.
Right. But it was Rhonda Byrne's The Secret, the book, and the film in 2006 that really just exploded the law of attraction into global consciousness, didn't it?
Absolutely. It mainstreamed it. Her simple, powerful formula, ask, believe, receive. It just resonated with millions.
Ask, believe, receive. It's catchy.
It is. And what this trajectory represents, really, is a kind of progressive secularization of new thought.
Secularization, how do you mean?
Well, instead of God, the law of attraction often replaces that concept with the impersonal universe,
Ah, okay.
which is in essence a mirror image of Kenyon's earlier Christianization of those very same core New Thought ideas.
Wow. Okay, so Kenyon took New Thought and made it Christian. And Byrne effectively took New Thought and made it secular, replacing God with the universe.
That's a pretty accurate way to summarize the divergence, yes. Same core engine, different branding.
That's fascinating. So what are the actual mechanics then? How does the law of attraction say you actually manifest things?
It generally rests on several key principles. First, there's like attracts like.
Okay.
The idea here is that the universe responds not necessarily to your pleas or wishes, but to your vibrational frequency. And that frequency is determined by your dominant thoughts and feelings.
My vibration, what's that mean practically?
It means feeling good, essentially. Holding positive thoughts and emotions is said to raise your vibration to match the vibration of what you desire, thus attracting it.
Okay. And the second principle?
That would be thoughts as creative vibrations. This really emphasizes that mantra, your thoughts become things. Crucially, it's the emotion attached to a thought that's said to give it its real creative power.
So just thinking isn't enough, you have to feel it.
Exactly. Feeling is the fuel. And finally, the goal is deliberate creation.
Deliberate creation.
The aim is to shift from unconscious sort of default creation, where you might be attracting things based on worries or fears without realizing it,
Right.
to conscious, intentional, deliberate creation of the life you actually desire by managing your thoughts and feelings purposefully.
So, if I'm understanding this right, the implication is huge. It suggests, well, absolute individual sovereignty, meaning you, the individual, have ultimate control over everything that comes into your life.
That is the core message.
That sounds incredibly empowering on one hand,
It is. That's a huge part of its appeal. Ultimate control, ultimate agency in your own life.
but also incredibly daunting, maybe.
It's both. And that's also where a major criticism comes in. Because if you are solely responsible for everything you attract.
Then you're also responsible for the bad stuff.
Precisely. It suggests the individual is solely responsible for their suffering. If your thoughts create your reality, then any hardship, any illness, any poverty must stem from your thoughts, your vibration. It places incredible power, yes, but also an incredible burden squarely on your own mind.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. When we actually bring these two movements side by side,
Yeah,
their shared DNA, it practically leaps out at you, doesn't it?
it really does.
Despite the different labels, the different window dressing, they seem to operate on a nearly identical set of mechanics.
The correspondences are striking. Let's just walk through them quickly.
Okay.
Ultimate power source. Word of faith points to the triune God, but a God who is seen as bound by his own covenant promises and spiritual laws.
Right, the laws he set up.
Exactly. Law of attraction points to the universe, framed as an impersonal law of energy and vibration.
Okay, power source. God bound by law versus the universe's law. Got it.
Primary mechanism, how you activate the power. In Word of Faith, it's positive confession. Verbally speaking desired outcomes into existence.
Using your words.
Yes. In Law of Attraction, it's vibrational alignment. Aligning your thoughts and feelings with the desired outcome.
Aligning your inner state. Okay.
Then the how-to formula, we mentioned them earlier. Word of Faith's say it, do it, receive it, tell it, from Hagen. And Law of Attraction's ask, believe, receive, popularized by Byrne.
Wow, they even sound rhythmically similar. Say, do, receive, tell, ask, believe, receive.
Very similar structure. 4 steps versus 3, but the core progression is there.
What about the key creative element?
For Word of Faith, it's words. Words are seen as containers of faith, literally carrying creative power.
Okay.
For Law of Attraction, it's thoughts and feelings. These are viewed as the vibrations that do the attracting.
Words versus thoughts, feelings, similar concept, different focus.
And finally, look at the explanation for failure. Why didn't it work? In Word of Faith, the blame falls on a lack of faith, negative confession, harboring doubt.
So it's your fault for not believing enough or saying the wrong things.
Essentially, yes. In Law of Attraction, failure is attributed to a low vibration, having resistance, or holding on to limiting beliefs.
Again, it comes back to your internal state being wrong.
Exactly. In both systems, if the desired outcome doesn't materialize, the responsibility is placed squarely back on the individual's inner state or incorrect application of the technique.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? How functionally similar these mechanics truly are, despite the completely different vocabularies. It's like, I don't know, like they're two apps with different skins but running the same underlying code.
That's a very good analogy. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we really need to take a deeper look at what I sometimes call the God factor.
The God factor.
Because on the surface, obviously, the concept of God seems to be the great divider between these two movements.
Yeah, one's explicitly Christian, the other's typically not.
Right. Yet a closer analysis reveals this profound convergence in function. As we touched on, the Word of Faith system teaches that God established these immutable spiritual laws and is effectively obligated himself to honor them when they're activated correctly by a believer.
So when a believer applies the faith formula, they're activating a law that essentially compels God to act. It's not just asking nicely.
That's the implication in much of the teaching. It compels a result because the law is being put into operation.
So God isn't just this benevolent, all-powerful being acting sovereignly, but someone whose actions are, in a way, governed or triggered by these spiritual laws that humans can learn to operate.
Exactly. And in that functional sense, the God of the Word of Faith movement ends up behaving much like the universe of the Law of Attraction.
How so?
Both are presented as reliable, law-abiding power sources that are ultimately controlled or at least triggered by the individual's correct application of a specific technique, whether it's faith-filled words or line vibrations.
So it becomes less about petitioning a sovereign, personal, divine being,
and more about operating a spiritual system according to its rules to get a desired output.
Wow. Okay. So what does this all mean for us, then? For society, when you have such widespread belief in these systems that, as we've seen, have so much in common under the hood.
Well, let's talk about the shared sociological functions first, and then the criticisms.
Okay.
The primary appeal for both movements is undeniable. It's the profound sense of personal agency they offer.
Control.
Exactly. In a world that often feels uncertain, chaotic, maybe random, they provide a blueprint for control. They tell individuals, you are the creator of your reality, not a victim of circumstances.
And that resonates with people, understandably.
Deeply. As the historian Kate Buller observes, particularly regarding the prosperity gospel, it aligns almost perfectly with the American dream's ethos of individualism, optimism, and the idea that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah, that makes sense. That sense of control is powerful. But then,
Yeah.
then there's the inevitable question of what happens when things go wrong, when life throws you a curveball.
Right. And what's fascinating, and perhaps troubling, is the convergence of criticism both movements face, especially regarding what critics often call the problem of suffering.
The problem of suffering, how do they handle that?
Well, this is where many critics argue both offer potentially cruel explanations for tragedy.
Wow.
Because if reality is simply, or primarily, a product of your inner state, your faith, your words, your thoughts, your vibrations, then victims of poverty, disease, accidents, injustice, they are implicitly, or sometimes explicitly, deemed responsible for their own plight.
Because they must have had negative confession or a low vibration.
That's the logical conclusion within these systems. Imagine, someone battling cancer or someone living in systemic poverty being told their suffering is ultimately their own fault because their faith wasn't strong enough or their thoughts weren't positive enough.
Ooh, that's...
The psychological toll of that kind of teaching can be immense. Critics call it a form of spiritual victim blaming.
Yeah, when you really sit with that, it's not just an academic point, is it? That sounds potentially devastating for someone going through hardship.
It really does. And that leads directly into the second major shared criticism. The accusation that both movements can foster a kind of narcissism.
Narcissism, because it's all about me.
Pretty much. Critics argue that both tend to promote a hyper-individualistic worldview. The focus becomes intensely centered on my health, my wealth, my happiness, my desires.
Right.
There's often very little emphasis, critics say, on broader community well-being, altruism, systemic issues, or social justice within these frameworks. It's all about manifesting your personal best life.
Okay. And are there specific theological or philosophical objections too?
Oh, absolutely. Within Christianity, the Word of Faith movement faces significant criticism for allegedly distorting Scripture, particularly around faith, suffering, and wealth, and for demoting God's sovereignty by making him subject to spiritual laws.
So other Christians challenge its interpretation.
Very strongly, yes. And the law of attraction, coming more from the secular New Age side, faces criticism for being essentially an unfalsifiable pseudoscience.
Meaning you can't scientifically prove it right or wrong.
Exactly. There's no empirical evidence to support its claims, and any failure is just explained away by the user not doing it right, not believing hard enough, not vibrating correctly. It's a closed loop.
It really makes you stop and think about the profound implications of these criticisms, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The allure of control is so strong, but the potential downsides, the potential for harm, seem pretty significant too.
They do. So to kind of wrap this up, the central finding of this deep dive, I think, is pretty clear. The Word of Faith movement and the law of attraction aren't really independent phenomena.
Yeah.
Instead, they are two powerful, modern expressions of a single, enduring metaphysical idea, the idea that human consciousness creates material reality.
So the Word of Faith movement is, as you said, a Christianized iteration of New Thought, while the law of attraction is its secularized cousin.
That's it, exactly. They're like two branches of the same family tree. They might speak different dialects, Christianese versus New Age jargon.
Yeah.
But they are fluent in the same fundamental language of causation. Mind faith causes effects in the world.
Yeah.
And the enduring, massive popularity of both these movements today, it really signals, I think, a profound modern spiritual hunger. A hunger for certainty, for meaning, and especially for control in a world that often feels very unpredictable.
That leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? What does this shared ancestry, this common mechanism, tell us about the deep human desire for ultimate control? And maybe more importantly, where do we or where should we draw the line between taking personal agency for our lives and accepting the often unforeseen, sometimes uncontrollable challenges that life inevitably throws our way?
That's the question to ponder.
Something for you to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.